Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, and thank you for joining our distinguished webinar series today. With us today, Dr. Giovanni Apruzzese. Did I pronounce that name correctly, or?
No, but that's very difficult. Nobody gets it right, not even Italian, so you're fine.
How do you say that? How do you say your name? Let's.
It's Giovanni Apruzzese.
Oh, okay. I'm going to try.
Very hard.
Yeah, I know, but he's going to discuss revealing the gap between research and practice in adversarial machine learning. And Dr. Giovanni is an assistant professor within the Hilti Chair of Data and Application Security at the University of Liechtenstein since 2022, and was previously a postdoc at the same institution. What's going on here? He received a Ph.D. and master's degree in computer engineering in 2020 and 2016, respectively, at the Department of Engineering. Enzo Ferrari, University of Modena and Reggio Emilia, Italy. In 2019, he spent 6 months as visiting researcher at Dartmouth College, Hanover, New Hampshire, USA, under the supervision of Professor V.S. Subrahmanian. His research interests involve all aspects of big data security analytics with a focus on practical machine learning, and his main expertise lies in the analysis of network intrusion, phishing, and adversarial attacks. He is also intrigued by the offensive capabilities of artificial intelligence. Dr. Giovanni, this is a great, distinct honor to have you as part of this webinar series. I'm so grateful that you agreed to do the talk, and we have several students who are logged in, and this talk is also promoted across multiple universities. So thank you so much, and the floor is yours. You have 45 minutes to talk, and then we have 10-15 minutes for Q&A.
Okay, so I will begin by sharing my screen. Okay, can you all see it?
Yes,
perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I am pleased to be here, me giving this talk. Actually, it was very hard for me to choose which topic to discuss. I think there are a lot of different things that I could have talked about. And I chose this one because it received a lot of appreciation. And it was like an extended talk that for a paper that I presented at the first IEEE conference on secure and trustworthy machine learning around 2 months ago. And I think that this will serve like as a brief overview and introduction for a lot of people that may decide either to delve into the subject of adversarial machine learning for the first time, or that are already experienced in it and would like to get to know it at a somewhat more deeper level, especially from the perspective of the interaction or the interplay between research and practice of this research area that is kind of getting a lot of traction as of late. And so one thing I want to say to all participants there that are looking at this talk right now, if you write questions, and I actually noticed that there are some questions asked in the chat, I will try to answer them immediately if they are short. Otherwise, I will look over them at the end of the talk. So feel free to type down on your doubts if there is anything that catches your attention, and if I can, I will answer it immediately. So to begin, the first thing I want to say is that this paper, and this is actually an important point that I want to make, was the result of a joint collaboration with a lot of other researchers. I had the pleasure of working together with people from both academia and industry. You can see the list of co-authors here in this slide. Hiram Anderson from Robust Intelligence, Sabino Dambra and Kevin Roundy. They are both within Norton LifeLock. And then there is David Freeman from Meta and Fabio Pierazzi from King's College London. But we were not the only ones actually who realized this paper and the findings of this paper, in a sense, because this is actually a strong point in this talk, because this paper was inspired by an event, a social event called Dagstuhl Seminar. I think that some of you may not know what it is, but essentially Dagstuhl Seminars, they are a series of research seminars that are held in a kind of remote location in Europe. It's a very small town, and there is a castle there, a real castle. And every year for around one week, there are seminars held there. And the idea is to have researchers from all around the world to gather and discuss about a given research topic. And last year in 2022, in July, I had the opportunity of participating in one of these seminars. It was, and the main topic was the security of machine learning. And this basically set everything in motion, probably also because it was one of the first events that most of the participants, around 40 people attended it. One of the first events that most participants attended to after the pandemic. So I assume that a lot of people, myself included, wanted to like interact physically with other researchers and like tell and share their recent research experiences in some way. So this seminar began with a talk by Catherine Grosse. She's currently a postdoc at APFL, but essentially she presented the research, the results of a research she carried out alongside other people, and this research kind of focused on how practitioners see the security of machine learning systems. And well, they interviewed a lot of people, and the general consensus, the main takeaway was, why do so? Which is a bit concerning, because there are a lot of papers that are published every day, that appear every day on the subject of security of machine learning and in general adversarial machine learning. This graph here that you can see in this slide, it's this graph here. That is on one of the pages of Nicola Scarlini. This basically keeping track of all the papers that appear every day on arXiv, and the numbers, you can see that they have been exploding in the last years. And yeah, I mean, we found it concerning that practitioners apparently do not care much of this topic, despite the increasingly high amount of papers that appear every day. And so we decided to discuss a bit during the seminar about this theme, about why it is that security practitioners do not care much, and why is it that perhaps our research was not gaining the same degree of attention in practice, at least compared to just the research domain. We were not able to find an answer to this question. We came up with some hypotheses, but like a concrete solution, we couldn't find it at the time. But something that we noticed, something that like a recurring theme that appeared during that seminar, was that real attackers guess, or they use educated guessing or heuristics to carry out the attacks. They do not do what is called they try not to favor complicated attacks or complex or algorithmically generated procedures. They try to try to understand perhaps the things that work better, and as a result of this educated guessing, they will actually succeed. This is what, so this observation was raised by real practitioners. There were people who attended, there were practitioners who attended this seminar from industry, and they said this. They said, this is what we find. This is what our system have to face every day. So we decided after the seminar, I was having a conversation with one of the attendees. It was Fabio Pierazzi. He was a former colleague of mine. And we were having a talk, and we decided to try to investigate this problem. Like, why is it that our research was not gaining any attention, and why is it that real attackers guess being a very common theme in practice, but very rarely seen in research? And so we decided, why not try to look into this a bit deeper and perhaps try to involve some participants of the Dagstuhl seminar. So he decided to send an email and like to some of the practitioners that attended that seminar. And he invited, and essentially we began working on this paper. And something I want to stress is that when we began working on this, we had absolutely no idea of what we would end up doing, because our original intention was just to write a short position paper, like only 5 pages in length. And the final paper was 26 pages long. And again, we did not expect that. It was just, let's say that the result was the end result was just the outcome of a lot of passion brought in by all of the people who contributed to this work, which was based on like a lot of enthusiastic discussion that we had just a few days before. And this is a strong point. This is something I would really want to remark. If there are like young researchers here, please try to attend these social events, social gatherings, and try to interact and network with people, because you never know what might come up with. And I'm very, very glad of having met these people there, because it allowed me to expand my horizon, but also to make these, to write this paper in just a short time frame. It only took 1 month, essentially, to write the paper. Some of the things were done before, but we simply combined everything together and wrote a paper that was apparently appreciated. So what is that we actually did in the paper? Why is it that also this talk kind of tries to reveal this gap about the research and practice in the context of adversarial machine learning? We began kind of this question. So do real attackers compute gradients? Now, I assume that some of the people who are listening to this are somewhat familiar with the domain of adversarial machine learning. And if you are not, I invite you to read any of the papers that are cited, either references either in the paper that we wrote, or like you can just type adversarial machine learning on any search engine. You would be provided with a lot of papers that deal with gradient-based attacks. So I would not go the extent of explaining what gradients attacks are, but just know that it is a very common and perhaps the standard way of attacking machine learning models in research. And so apparently a lot of papers do use gradients and do leverage gradient-based attacks to perform the attacks they describe in their papers, but real attackers apparently do not do this. And we try to investigate this. So do real attackers compute gradients in practice? So the first thing we try to do to answer this question is look at the AI incident database. I do not know if any of you are familiar, but we kind of went to this resource and we tried to look for entries. We tried to look for reports of real attacks, real reported incidents that perhaps were carried out by means of gradient-based adversarial examples. And just to give you an idea, this is the AI incident database. Okay, and this is truly a database. There are like reports of attacks that have been carried out in the wild. Sometimes there are even reports taken from research papers, and we try to query this repository with several terms. One of these is adversarial examples. Now, we performed this search in July and August 2022, and well, the results did not change much from then. We couldn't really find anything that really said, hey, there is a real case of a real attack that bypassed a real system by using examples, by using techniques borrowed from the research domain that use gradient-based computation. So we couldn't find anything at the time. So we decided to bring this a bit deeper and try to do something more original. So we reached out to a cybersecurity company. Of course, this was with the help of two of the co-authors. We reached out to them and we said, could you please provide us with some samples that are like poorly analyzed, that create troubles to your machine learning systems? And they agreed. They gave us some again, samples have been apparently misclassified by a deep learning phishing website detector that they use to analyze the websites visited by the employees of one of their clients. And let's say that the context is pretty straightforward. There is a system that uses deep learning to verify whether a web page is benign or malicious, in this case, phishing or not. And we looked into these samples, and which, okay, again, were poorly analyzed by this system. And we tried to see if any of these samples could have been created by means of techniques proposed in research papers. Now, what did we find? We found that the majority of the pages that created this misclassification, they were out of distribution. Now, this is a pretty common problem in machine learning. Sometimes it happens that a machine learning system simply has to analyze a sample that was completely different from anything that the model had seen during its training stage, meaning that it's not a surprise that it is misclassified or that the analysis has somewhat wrong. But among those that were not out of distribution, among those that were actually similar to something that had been seen before, we found that they were mostly like this. So, for example, there were pages that resembled the Google homepage, or like something related to Google, and which evaded the model, probably because there was like a mistake, a typo here. We had pages that resembled Outlook and had a very blurry logo. We had pages that resembled Rakuten and had these like weird artifacts, or Uber as well. You can see these kind of, is that a typo? Is that like a weird character? Point is, these techniques, they are apparently all that it is needed to evade the real system deployed by real companies that analyze real samples. And these are real, in a sense, adversarial attacks, but none of these apparently use gradient-based computation. And because these techniques, these tactics, they have been known for decades by phishers, and they've also been known for decades by practitioners, but a solution to these still has to be found. If you look at literature in the context of phishing website detection, you will see that these things have been known like since the 90s, essentially. But they are still valid today. There are still strategies that are effective today against production systems that use deep learning. And we argue that attacks of this kind, they are much cheaper to stage, especially because they rely on well-known techniques. And this is not a surprise that it is not a surprise that attackers use these in practice instead of perhaps the tactics that are typically seen in research papers. So this was more or less our starting point. So we saw, hey, we asked ourselves, do real attacker compute gradients? Evidence, we couldn't find any in the wild, and we tried to look into this specific use case, and we also couldn't find anything. Of course, we cannot truly say whether real attackers really do not compute gradients. So if you were expecting an answer to this question, I'm sorry, but we cannot provide one, especially because it is kind of a devil's proof. We would have to ask every attacker that exists like everywhere. We would have to ask all of them, hey, have you ever used gradient-based computation to perform your attacks? And we would have to have all of them to answer no to provide an answer to this question. That is, nobody uses them, which is fairly difficult. But let's say that evidence points that perhaps it is not what it is used today. And so we tried, like based on these finding, based on this discovery, we tried to find some explanations. And so to this purpose, we tried to, in this paper, we kind of raised the attention of some concepts that are pillars of operational cybersecurity, but are somewhat rarely accounted for in research. And the first one is machine learning systems. Because real systems or real world applications of machine learning, they have to do with systems. Okay, typically what is typically done in research is you have some training data, you use it to train a machine learning model, and then you test the model over some test data, and then you see the results, and then you attack the model. Now, this procedure is simplistic because in practice, the machine learning model is just a component of a much more complex system. And it's a complex system which has many more elements that take part in the overall pipeline. For example, there is pre-processing, and perhaps the output of the machine learning model may be further processed as well. This complexity is rarely captured in research paper, and there are even, we argue, some types of system which we call invisible, in the sense that not only a potential attacker does not know how they work. We're not talking about black box attacks. We mean that sometimes even the output of the system is not readily available to the attacker, because perhaps the system produces an output that is further analyzed by a human observer, or perhaps is stored in some database, and some feedback may arrive to the users, and which also includes the potential attackers, after a long delay, sorry. And these complexities, again, they're rarely accounted for in research papers. We typically only focus the attention on machine learning models. And to provide a real use case of this, we describe in this paper the architecture of a real system. And it's the real system, the real machine learning system that is used by Facebook to detect spam. Essentially what Facebook told us is that they designed these machine learning based detector by using a layered architecture, and at the topmost layer is the focus of the system is to prevent massive attacks or attacks at scale. What Facebook apparently is more scared about are actions that are carried out by bots or by automated scripts. So the primary focus of Facebook in detecting spam is not in detecting spam, but is in detecting if something is automated. The moment they detect that something is automated, they will essentially block any kind of activity, be it spam or legitimate, by the users and by the accounts that make these activities and these posts. And only much later, at the lower layer of this system, there is the actual spam detection process, which uses, among others, also deep learning and machine learning techniques. And it is here that Facebook actually detects if something is spam, or if if the content of a given post is somewhat suspicious and should be blocked and should be not shown to other users. But this complexity again is hidden. An attacker cannot see any of these, and to be truly successful, real attackers have to bypass all of these layers. Now, of course, this does not mean that Facebook is able to detect any type of spammy content that is posted therein. Of course, this detector is not omnipotent. It has flaws. It can be bypassed, but let's say that some of the scenarios that are envisioned in the research paper, that do not account for all of these, because if you only focus the attention on the machine learning model, on the spam detector, on the lowest layer, well, that is very simple, because you are kind of neglecting what is before that, and meaning that in some cases, the sample that is created to bypass the model by a researcher, well, it will never reach this model in the first place. And just again, to provide a further example of this, if I go on Facebook and I create some, with the intention of create some form of spammy content, and let's say that I create a post that looks more or less like this. Now I took this picture today. I didn't post this, okay? I didn't flood Facebook with a spammy post. But if I post this and I were an attacker, the only thing I would see is the post. I would not be able to see anything that is done by Facebook under the radar. I would not be able to see that this input is analyzed by machine learning. I would not be able to see the output of the model. I would not be able to see even what the decision, what had actually been done by Facebook at all in response to this activity that I carried out. And let us assume that I actually clicked on post here and I posted this. I think that these posts would have gone through without any problems. Now, does that mean that I evaded the detector? And what if this post gets removed after 1 hour or 1 day? And what if this post gets removed, like if my account gets suspended after 1 week? These are all uncertainties that an attacker may have and that are certainly accounted for again in research papers. Because, I mean, if you send like massive queries, if you assume that I can send like thousands of these posts and see the response immediately, well, this is not the case. I would have to require years to like send all the queries that are required to carry out some typical black box attacks by research. And so after saying this, why and to provide some further evidence on the state of research, something that we did in the paper is analyze all papers that have done something with regards to adversarial machine learning in the last 3 years. Well, it was from 2019 to 2021, and that were published in the top 4 cybersecurity conferences. And we found out that most of these papers, that a wide majority of them, they only attack individual machine learning models. And also they attack models that have been developed by using benchmark data sets. Like they were not models deployed in reality. And let's say that given the fact that very rarely research papers attack real systems, and even when they try to reproduce a system in some way, it is a system that is like just a toy in a sense. Well, it's not surprising that practitioners do not care much about the findings of our research. But something I want to say in defense of researchers is that this is difficult. Attacking a real system or reproducing the full pipeline of a real system or using the data used to train real machine learning systems, it's tough. It's incredibly tough. I had to face this problem myself a lot of times. I think a lot of other researchers had to face these problems as well, because we do not know how real systems are made. Clearly, everything is proprietary. It's closed source. So we do not know how the pipeline is structured. And also we do not know what data they are actually trained on. So let's say that it's not also a surprise that the situation looks like this, but let's say that this is one of the reasons that probably explain why there is such a huge gap between research and practice. So the second observation we want to make has to deal, and that is again rarely accounted for in research, is that operational cybersecurity is rooted in economics. So it is well known that given enough resources, any attacker will be successful in their attack. And also if defenders, if they had unlimited resources, they could essentially block any attack. But both cases, they are extreme, and this is not how the real world works. And in fact, what typically is the case in reality is that both attacker and defender, they try to optimize and to prioritize either their attack or their defenses. Attackers will try to use that strategy that is more convenient to them, that provides the best cost benefit, that has the best cost benefit ratio. Whereas defenders, they will try to prioritize attacks that are most relevant for their own systems. And you can see here, these are 2 tweets by Konstantin Berlin. He He's the head AI at Sophos, and he clearly wrote. This was taken by a real discussion on Twitter, had that entailed practitioners and researchers, and this person they said that adversarial example in general, they are not really a problem for them, or rather, it's not that they are not a problem, but it would only become a problem for them if these attacks would be deployed at scale. And by the time this would happen, I mean, if adversarial examples they were truly deployed at scale, they say that they could easily prevent them by just looking at some watermarks. Of course, this is the opinion of these people, but the point is just to show that real practitioners, they have priorities. And as we showed earlier, most of the samples that evade real systems, they have little to do with adversarial examples or with gradient-based computation. So this perhaps also explains why practitioners prefer to focus on other security issues than adversarial examples created by means of gradients. And so something that we also investigate a bit in the paper is the perspective of cost, because a common theme, a common metric to measure the cost of an attack in research is by looking at queries. The idea is we propose an attack that uses a few amount of queries, meaning that it is convenient for the attacker, and perhaps it requires less queries than other attacks, so our attack is more efficient, is more effective, more cost effective. This is a bit of a oversimplification, we believe, because it does not capture everything that is involved to make these queries. And we tried to look into this a bit more, again, by performing a case study. So we reached out to the organizers of a well-known cybersecurity evasion competition that entails machine learning systems, and MLSec. And in 2021, they organized a competition that revolved around evading a phishing website detector. Yeah, phishing is pretty common. And so the idea is, so participants, they were given some web pages, which they had to modify in some way, and ensure that these web pages, they would evade the machine learning models that were subject to this competition, to this challenge. So 4 teams were able to craft adversarial examples, to craft adversarial web pages that evaded all the models. But surprisingly, none of these 4 teams, are actually 2 of these teams, they disclosed their strategy. And in none of these documentations was mentioned that they use gradient-based computation. Actually, everything had to deal with their domain expertise and knowledge on websites and on probably how to evade phishing website detectors. But the other interesting part is that the team that won the challenge, it was the team that required the least amount of queries to do so, because they only required 320 queries, apparently. You can see here in this plot. But this team, they were those who submitted their solution last. The team that actually was the first who provided a correct solution, like a solution that evaded all models, was the team that submitted they required only 600 queries, half their amount, double the amount of the first place team, but it required only around 14 days since the beginning of the challenge to arrive to this solution, whereas the first place team, they required around 42 days. So this kind of shows that, yes, you can use queries as a method to estimate the cost of the attack, but this does not show how much time a human had to actually use to make the queries, make the refined queries that would allow the human to, the attacker in this case, to reach their goal. So let's say this is also an aspect that is rarely accounted for. time and human factor in general. This is not typically seen in research, and we also look into this when we analyze their paper. We try to look into this a bit more in detail. And yes, apparently, around half of the papers that we analyze, they do try to account for the cost, but this is only, again, in terms of queries. Or not in the case of papers that propose defenses, because we also consider papers that dealt with like defenses to adversarial examples. These were kind of measured. The effectiveness of their like cost was measured in terms of performance degradation or performance trade-off. Nowhere we were able to find papers that said that this attack requires like this amount of days, or it took us months to arrive to this solution, or implementing this defense took us weeks or hours. No, we were never able to find any trace of these considerations in the paper that we analyzed. But in reality, they are important. So again, this also may explain why there is a gap such big today, because researchers, they only care about things that in practice they are relevant, but they're only like a tiny portion of the entire development pipeline for both the attacker and the defender. So before I move on to the main takeaways, I want to express again a few words on the current state of research, since I have the chance. First is about data and reproducibility. So something that we also noticed and we found somewhat surprising was that despite the papers that we analyzed being from cybersecurity conferences, the wide majority of these papers, they had to deal with images, like attacks against machine learning systems for images that analyze images in general, or audio or text. We found a surprisingly small amount of papers that had to deal with real security problems. Like I remember counting around 4 papers that had to deal with machine learning systems for network intrusion detection, 4 papers that had to deal with malware detection, and I think 5 or 6 that had to deal with phishing, which is a bit weird because, I mean, images, yeah, they like, and by images, I mean like attacks like on Cypher, MNIST, or the traffic signs. These were typically data set used. And yes, it's a bit strange because or at least for myself, I would expect some more focus on real cybersecurity problems when it comes to the models under the attack. And there are another interesting part is that only half of the paper, even though there is an increasing trend here, only half of the papers, they release their source code, which again, it is a bit concerning because this is actually a common theme in machine learning research, and we are happy that this trend is improving. But let's say that these are 2 things that future research may account for, like try to explore other domains, other application domain of machine learning, because nowadays it's used like in a lot more application than just image recognition. And also with respect to the source code, well, we will say something about this. I will say something about this soon, but let's try to be a bit more open with our source code. And another thing I want to mention are inconsistencies about the terminology adopted in research. This is especially true when it comes to box-based terminology, which is all over the place. Some papers, they use, for example, the term white box to denote to describe a given concept, and they use it to describe something that is different or completely different. This also applies for black box. Now you can see in this slide, I have taken verbatim parts of the papers that we analyzed, and I invite like all listeners, and the audience, like either the one that is following this talk right now or in the future, to look in detail and compare these statements and see all the differences, despite all of them saying we consider a white box attacker or a black box attacker. I remember when I was reading the papers and like I had this question in mind: what is the attacker that they are considering? And I was extremely confused when I was looking in the details. And we believe that this is something that should be considered or should be rectified in the future, because it creates a lot of confusion, or at least it can create a lot of confusion in myself and in the other authors that wrote the paper. So to recap and to draw some main takeaways of all these about all the things that I've just described and discussed. At the end of the paper that we presented, we make and we state 4 positions that we believe that, if they are embraced by future research, would allow to bridge the gap between research and practice. And notice that this is something that we would like all research to do, but it's not like every paper should do what we ask for and what we would like to see, but this is something that we would like the entire research to do in the future, but not just research, also practitioners. In fact, some of our positions, they address specifically practitioners. So to begin, the first is adapting threat models to machine learning systems. I said that in reality, we have machine learning systems, not machine learning models. And so it is important that in the future, researchers, they try to expand their threat model. They try to see an attacker that does not just want to, for example, evade a machine learning model, but that has a broader goal and that has to face an entire system. And in doing this, we also invite researchers to use more precise terminology. Again, more example of these on the paper. And the second position that we would like this also addressed to researchers is to try to make some cost considerations, cost-based considerations on their threat models, because this is what real attackers do, and also what real defenders do. Let's try to incorporate some economics, considerations on economics in all the solution and all the contributions, in a sense. And the third position is that we want to endorse this more for practitioners. By the way, we would like to see more collaborations between industry and academia. Our paper was the result of this. None of the case studies that we provided would have been possible if Fabio Pierazzi and I would not have teamed up with people from industry. And so this is why we would like to have we would like to see more collaboration between these two worlds. And we know that this is difficult, because especially it is difficult for researchers to even connect in some way to practitioners. And this is why we would like practitioners to make to simplify the process that or the steps that researchers may have to follow to get in contact with them. Because nowadays, if for example, I wanted to attack a real system, I would have to contact, for example, Facebook. Now, where would I begin? Who should I have to contact if I had this idea in mind? It's difficult because there is no clear email address that I could send an email to for making if I wanted to explore this possibility. And the fourth and last position, which has to do with the last observation that I discussed, is that we would like our community to disclose source code, or to embrace source code disclosure with a just culture, meaning we would like we have to accept that perhaps some some evaluation, some like a reproduction, some implementation. They may not be 100% perfect, but if we release source code and there are some mistakes there, future research could find these mistakes, fix them, and the contribution of the research would not be invalidated unless like everything is very, very poor quality. And we would be able perhaps to systematize the mistakes. There are already papers that do this, and so that our entire community could benefit from this. And as a bonus, in the last page of the paper, there is a table with the links to all the source code repositories that have been made publicly available by the papers that we analyze. So if you want to start from somewhere, you could use this. So to wrap it all up, do real attackers compute gradients? It was kind of the beginning, our starting point. We cannot prove it yet. Clearly, as I said, this is a devil's proof, a probatio diabolica. Perhaps some attackers, they really do use this, which is why we would like to see more efforts also on these that try to verify whether this question is actually, the answer to this question is actually negative or not. And so to answer this question, we would have, for example, you would have to do something in regards to forensics of adversarial examples. There are, I think, only 2 papers that do this. So if you're looking for ideas, try looking into this. I think that a lot of people would benefit from this type of research. And last thing I want to say before closing, this is the picture that shows all the people that directly or indirectly contributed to this research, which are all the participants of the Dartmouth seminar. I really want to thank them again, because without their contributions, I would not have been able to write this paper, and the research community would not be able to read our findings, and I would not be having this talk. So this is all. I hope that you liked it, and I am free, and I will be happy to receive any questions or answer any of your concerns.
Thank you so much, Dr. Giovanni, for your insight. This is very interesting, and we don't get those type of talks like what you do in terms of addressing security of AI. So I think it's interesting how you started showing the email, and truly that is, so what can research can do to fill this gap between practitioners and researchers? Do you think we probably need some kind of more engagement between these two groups in whether it could be workshops or some kind of I'm just curious to see, are there any task force or people are working on in standardizing these problematic terms that you talked about, and it requires some kind of ways to come to some agreement, right, by the groups, these two groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful question. And yes, let's say that the underlying theme, and this is also why I began this talk with by explaining what the Dartmouth seminar is to truly have more interactions between research and practitioners, because this is the way forward. You see, I think that we all agree that machine learning nowadays is not just a research topic. This is something that is used in practice. We all see it today with ChatGPT and spam detector scale, the one that we discussed in the paper, and perhaps automated driving, whatever. So we have machine learning systems deployed in practice, and to assess the security of these, we have researchers, they have to get their hands on them. They have to understand how they work in some way, because even if I decided to attack one of these systems and perhaps I'm successful, unless I can see what happens in these systems, really at the low level, I would not be able to say whether my successful attack is the result of a problem in the machine learning pipeline or a problem of some other element that perhaps made a wrong decision. So are we actually studying machine learning, or is it a problem of some other component? We don't know. So we would have to have access to these systems. But the only way to do so, by researchers at least, is to collaborate with the people who actually make these systems, because nowadays they are so complex that you cannot just use them in research. So really, the way to answer your question is truly try to look for machine learning systems that are usable and that are open. I don't think you will find many nowadays. So if you cannot, try to establish some collaborations. What I can say is that practitioners, they want this. Practitioners, they want their machine learning systems to be tested for security. I myself have some ongoing collaborations with people that, like with startups, for example, that have machine learning, that use machine learning. And when I say, oh, I would be interested in testing their security, they say, oh, I would love that. We would love that. But probably it's the researchers who have to make the first step and try to contact them, and it's also practitioners who would have to be somewhat more open to this. So
great. We have a question from Dr. Tessic Kim from University of Texas, Kingsville. I think, can you share some examples of AI robustness research efforts against the adversarial machine learning attacks?
That's actually a good question, because something that I kind of forgot to mention here, the problem of robustness. So the quick answer to your question is that if you find the paper, I think I will communicate. I think the title of our paper is "Real Attackers Do Not Compute Gradients," and there is if you look at this link here, you will be brought to the website we created, in which we have everything there. And if you look at this table, most of so these are real use cases or research cases of that have to do with robustness and attacks against machine learning. So you can all find them there. But I would like to use your question because you wrote robustness, and robustness is a problem that is somewhat orthogonal to security. And that perhaps today, the main value of the adversarial examples and the main value of attacks that leverage gradient-based computation is to address problems related to robustness and not security. Because robustness just means, let's try to make this model better. Let's try to prevent it from making misclassifications, for example. This does not mean that misclassification is the result of an attacker that is trying to evade the system or to have reach a malicious goal. So this is why, for robustness purposes, adversarial examples created by means of gradients, they are useful. And in fact, if that is the goal, then we do not have anything really against the current state of the literature. But what we were trying to discuss and to raise the attention on with this paper is a security problem. And security means that there is an attacker, like a real person, that has a real goal in mind, and that is moved by economics. And at the other end of the spectrum, there is a defender that has to prioritize threats based on the few resources that they have available. If you overlook this aspect, then we would be essentially falling into the robustness area. And we believe that if you are just focusing on improving the robustness of machine learning systems, you can very well use adversarial examples in the common way. But otherwise, we would like to have some more practical aspects, such as economics and threat models that are more representative of reality.
We have another question. Can you discuss in brief about FGSM models and other gradient-based models, whether they're only applicable to neural nets or is also applicable to a wide range of traditional machine learning models?
That is actually a very good question. And that is actually a very, very, very good question. That was also mentioned a lot in at the StatML conference in which I presented this paper. So yes, let's say that one of the biggest drawbacks of the strategies, of the techniques that are used to create adversarial examples is to use gradients. And gradients, such as FGSM, fast gradient sign methods, and it uses gradients. But what if the model that you're attacking does not use gradients? because a prerogative of these techniques is that you know the gradients of the model and you construct an adversarial example by using this information. But if the model you're attacking does not have any gradients, such as a decision tree or a random forest, which are very, very good and superior. I mean, every practitioner has said this. Every practitioner, even at SATML, they said, we use shallow models, we use trees, we use random forest because we analyze tabular data, and these models, they are more proficient. So what if your model does not use a gradient? And yeah, this is a limitation. I think there are some papers that try to convert gradient-based attacks into a variant for tree-based models, but I think it's a largely unexplored area of research. And sometimes what is sometimes seen is that that by using a tree-based model, for example, they create a neural network-based model that tries to resemble the tree-based model. They create adversarial examples that are effective on the neural network model, which is a surrogate, and then they transfer these examples to the tree-based model, trying to leverage the transferability of adversarial attacks. This is what you see sometimes in research. And but to answer your question, I don't think there are clear use cases of gradient-based adversarial examples creation strategies for tree-based models, because and this actually would be a very good thing to investigate.
I have a question. You talked about this competition MLSec. There were four positions. You talked about between the queries and cost, right? I think does these group are aware of their why in the world that the team that won first position and had less query, they had access to the previous I'm not sure the competition. I don't know much about the competition. They have access to the training models, or the gist of this particular slide is to say the number of queries do matter in the true cost of evaluating an attack. If that is the case, it looks like there's some team 10,000 queries or something that they have. Could you shed light into this to see, are you trying to say that query do matter in the true cost evaluation? If so, some are nice query. I don't know.
Yeah, gladly. The point is this. So this challenge, the rules of this challenge were fairly simple. You are given 10 web pages, and you must modify these web pages so that they evade 7 machine learning models. So every web page, it must simultaneously evade 7 machine learning models that check for phishing. But the attacker, like the participants, they did not have access to the internal architecture of these models. They knew nothing about the models. This was the traditional black box attack. What they could do, the only thing that the attackers and the participants in a sense could do is to query the models, like sending queries and using the response, meaning it was phishing or it was not phishing, to verify, like to further improve their strategies. So in a sense, it was kind of a guessing game. Like you submit the sample, you see the output, and then you try to change your strategy based on like these output. So, as I said, and of course, the rules of the challenge said the winners are those that use the least amount of queries. So by looking at the rules of the challenge, yes, I mean, the first place team only required 320 queries, which won the challenge according to the rules. But in reality, again, this is a bit more simplistic. First, because it took them like triple the amount of overall time to reach this conclusion. Second, probably they reached this goal by looking at the results of previous teams, because these, like, it was known by everybody. Every participant could see how many queries and how many successful evasions other participants had made. So probably what the first place team did was to wait some time, see how many queries were had been used by other competitors, and then try to use these as a guide. Because if I know that someone evaded the model by using 600 queries, I know that that is my upper bound, and I must do something that requires less amount of queries. So this is not something that real attackers really do, or this is not information that truly simulates a real scenario. This was a competition. So we simply wanted to show that real attackers have to deal with an additional level of depth, which is like human effort and time, which if we just look at the rules by research and perhaps competitions, this is a bit more simplistic, a bit too much simplistic.
Great. In the interest of time, Nirup, do you see any other questions on the chat, or are we done with the Q&A?
It looks like we're clear. Yep.
Okay, great. So with this, we thank the speaker for taking the time and effort for joining this session. Thank you, Dr. Giovanni, for your time. And
thank you.
We will send you a plaque and a nice certificate signed by our dean and people here. And I think this is very enlightening, and I appreciate for sharing your knowledge here. And hopefully the participants also enjoyed your session. We will also make it available online. I'll send you the link also, so you can also use it for your own promotion or other purpose, so great. And do you have 5 minutes after this, so I can be able to send you a link? Okay, I'll send you a separate Zoom link. We can chat. Thank you.
Gladly. Yeah.